We could see firsthand some of the great things that were happening in the ethnic studies program at PhD as I were college for a few years in a previous life. But you know, what I really want to say is this: that in Augie, presented a very compelling case for the whole issue of what's taught in those classes and so forth. But I would tell you there's another element there that really needs to be replicated in every school in this state, every school in this country, and that is that those teachers in this program build solid, meaningful relationships with their students. And that in itself, if you have other things, other variables of course, but that in itself is probably the most significant aspect of success of that program. Andrade Duncan, a researcher and writer of these issues from UC San Francisco, has stated that the single most influential factor in the student success is one person, whether it's a teacher, a parent, a priest, a coach, whatever the case may be. This gentleman still teaches high school. He teaches one high school class, I believe, right, Augie? And he says at the beginning of his class, he'll scan the room. He'll stand at the door and greet kids every day and say, "Welcome to my classroom. Good morning. I saw you, my mom, Papa yesterday," or whatever the case might be, just to build that relationship immediately. And then he'll look at the kids. There's kids that are athletes or in student council. Those kids are taken care of. He identifies those kids that need that special attention, and he takes them to lunch. He talks to them. He builds that relationship. And I think that's incredibly important to remember as we move forward. The other thing I want to talk about is, when Augie talks about some of our elected officials and their behaviors, and the things they do and the things they say that are hurtful and painful, and really put us in a regressive mode in terms of our progress as a people. They're all politicians, but guess what we can do? We can vote. And we need to educate our populace on these issues. Things get very, very confusing. I know I was talking about this, Anna, but there's another proposition, Proposition 107, quote unquote, the Ward-Conway Initiative, that addresses the use of race and gender. That it's now illegal to use race and gender as a means of selecting programs. You cannot discriminate using those two things. But what it does really in reality, it hinders programs like ethnic studies. You can no longer use state dollars to support those programs. Crisis centers for women that have been raped. You can no longer use state dollars to do that. Because now you're using race and gender to utilize those funding sources from the state government. So we have to educate our populace. We have to become more aware of the real issues and go out there and vote and educate our populace. The Latino vote is a popular strategy right now amongst all those candidates who are running for office. Let's go out for the Latino vote. But let's us educate them on the issues. Get them registered to vote, then educate them on the real issues. I think that's an incredibly important fact that we need to consider as we move forward, especially in a very critical year. And the other thing I want to mention about all these new laws that are in play in our state right now. This ethnic studies law is one. 1070 is huge. There are other laws out there that are going to direct public schools to identify which kids are documented and undocumented and report that to the state. Those are all coming to bear in this state. And in my state, when 1070 passed, I had this strong feeling inside, I'm moving out of Arizona. And for me, for a lifetime member of this state, to even think about it or consider that is horrible. Obviously, I'm not going anywhere, so I think we need to stay here and fight the fight. But the point is, there's a lot of things happening in this state that are racist, that are anti-minority, anti-Latino, and there's people at the Capitol making wrong decisions about us. So let's get out there and educate our populace about the real issues and have them vote and do what you can. So I'm going to get on to my real topic, which is really related to this, and that is high school equity. And you all see the data. Augie addressed a little bit about the achievement gap. And I've been in this business for 26 years. And in 26 years, minus a few exceptions, like the LULAC study program at USD, the achievement gap has not changed. It really hasn't. There are some pockets. No Child Left Behind suggests that there are some things changing, and they may be changing, but those changes are usually just snapshots. What we need to work on is sustaining those changes for the long haul. You know, I often tell people that create these goals for their schools, and they'll say things like 80% of our student body will pass the aims in math. Well, how about the other 20%? You know, recently I submitted, let me identify who I am first, okay? I apologize. My name is Albert Siqueiros, and I'm currently a superintendent of Indianois Volunteer Unified School District, and that's itself, and that is a reservation school. We're a public school on a reservation land. And recently I submitted a grant to a, let's just say, state agency. And that state agency rejected my grant. And you know why they rejected the grant? Because my goals were not reasonable. They were not attainable. And what I said, at the end of each grade level, each of my students will be reading at grade level. And they said, you can't, that's impossible, you can't do that. So I had to rewrite my goals. And we came up with this term called a stretch goal. The stretch goal is something that's used in business, I think. And so we said our stretch goal is that every kid will do that. Then we came up with a SMART goal. Something that's measurable, that complies with the state's direction and guidance and what they want to see. So we said, okay, every kid will gain 1 year's growth at each level in reading and in math. I'm going to be submitting the goal on Monday. Let's see what happens. But you see what I'm saying? There's a lot of things out there that prevent us from doing our real work. In that particular grant, myself and 6 members of my staff have spent probably 200 hours on this grant. 200 hours. So that's an important part of what we need to do. Think of the real work we could be doing with our students and our teachers and our community. But the bureaucracy is so deep that it prevents us from doing things we need to do. But nonetheless, the thing I really want to address with you today is this whole issue of equity and what is happening in our school systems today. You know, there's a lot of literature about the issues with achievement gap, what our high school needs to do to change. And I would suggest to all of you today, the high school in themselves are not the only reason why schools are not being, our kids are not being successful in schools. It's a K-12 systemic issue. In my school district, there's a regression. It's called, you know, in sociology, there's a phenomenon called the Matthew effect. And the Matthew effect really indicates that over a period of time, things regress. In the simple term, you know, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. That same concept. When kids are disengaged in reading, for example, in elementary school, and they struggle completely all the way through, they become fully disengaged in reading, and you'll never recapture that. So what happens when they get to high school? It's almost too late to make a difference. They're so far behind. So I would suggest to all of you that the whole issue of equity really starts in preschool. We have to align all our programs, what we do, and expect and demand that our public schools do a better job of educating our children. You know, this past year, well, actually in 2007, and I don't know what the data is for this year yet, but 64% of Latinos graduated. 64% in comparison to 81% of their Anglo cohort or peers. So we've got some problems in the state to address. The dropout rate was twice that of the Anglo population as well. Why are those things happening? I would suggest also that when you look at public schools, there is some institutional racism taking place.